Hello, everyone. Welcome to our Postman live stream. Looks like we already have a lot of people joining the chat. Great to see that everyone is tuning in, and it looks like we're here with a lot of folks. So I just wanted to take this time to introduce myself. My name is Pooja Mistry. I'm a developer advocate here at Postman, and I'm here with a very special guest. Ray, do you want to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Hey everybody, I'm Ray. I'm a developer advocate for a company called 8base. We are a low-code platform built specifically for developers. And if things sound a little weird with how I'm talking, I'm Canadian, so that explains that.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, thanks so much for joining us. I know, Ray, you and I have been hanging out like almost every couple of weeks trying to get get what we're doing today together. So if you don't already know, we're going to be working with a lot of GraphQL APIs today. So I'm really excited to kind of see how we can work with 8base. I know you guys have a really great GraphQL API. We have some questions in the chat about what's 8base, and this is a perfect time for us to kind of dive right in and talk to you a little bit about what 8base is, and then also how you can work with GraphQL APIs, whether they're 8base's GraphQL APIs or just any GraphQL APIs within Postman. So I'm really excited to see how diverse this crowd is. We have people coming in from Turkey. We have some folks from Brazil, some folks from Glasgow. So people joining all over. So so before we kind of dive into exactly what 8base is, how to work with GraphQL, I love to do this segment called In Case You Missed It. So with Postman, there's so many interesting things that are going on all the time, and we have some really unique updates and things that are happening with our product. Our product is consistently changing all the time as well. And so I wanted to take this time to just share my screen really quick and just do this segment called In Case You Missed It. So let me go ahead and share my screen. Let me hide the chat just really quick. So a couple of updates just about Postman that is happening. So we have this new VS Code extension that's now in early access, and there's some new features. So for those of you who are avid VS Code users, you can use Postman with VS Code. So your collections now are available in VS Code. You can kind of use it in a very similar way as you're using like the Postman client, or you're using the web app or the desktop app. So you're also able to now work with environments and work with variables. So that makes it a lot easier, especially if you're developing specifically in VS Code. The next thing I wanted to share is a huge announcement that recently came out. So Postbot, which is our version of our AI assistant. So with Postman, we have our own AI assistant as well. So it's called Postbot, and it's an open beta. So if you're interested in working with Postbot and you wanted to try it, I'm going to just post that in the chat. And that should allow you to kind of try it out in early access. So basically, this AI assistant allows you to generate your tests for your collections. So instead of writing scripts, you can use postbots to generate tests. It's actually a really cool feature, and it's really interesting. So feel free. It's in open beta, so you can try it as an early access user. So feel free to read the blog and kind of get a better insight on how to kind of get used to it. And it looks like someone said that they're so happy that the VS Code extension was introduced, which I'm really glad about that you find that interesting as well. And so with that, we also have an unboxing Q2 session that we did, I think, last week with Postman Intergalactic. So we dive into all of the most newest features that Postman recently released. So for example, we have a lot of new improvements with our user interface, and you can get if you're interested in just kind of getting a more of an idea of what some of our features came out, the one big feature we dive into is our performance testing. So performance testing is brand new in Postman. You can now use your Postman desktop client to test the performance of your APIs. You can test the loads of your APIs, and you can test virtual users. So it's a really great way to kind of observe the overall performance of your API, as well as error rates and things like that. So we dive a little bit deeper into performance testing. So if you're interested in just kind of learning a little bit more about all of our features, you can always read our product update blogs. We talk about all of these things and more. And so I wanted to just share that before we kind of dive right in and get started. So with that, let me go ahead and let's get back to what we're talking about today. So let's talk to you, Rey. So I wanted to just ask you a couple of questions about just like what exactly is 8base. I know a lot of our attendees today are very curious about what's going on, and I'd love to get more of an insight into what you do and your background as well, like as a dev advocate for.
Yeah. So, I mean, very quickly in terms of myself, I've been a developer advocate for a few years now. I was a hardcore developer for the longest time before that. And then I kind of fell backwards into this role of being a developer advocate, which is a lot of fun because, our job is, it's very, it spans the gamut a bit in terms of stuff we have to do, right? We get to experiment with technologies. We get to show developers how cool our product is. We get to bring feedback of the product from, the developers into the engineering team to make sure the product is good enough for the company. So, or the product is good enough for the developers. So it's a really exciting role that I've been a part of for a few years with a few different companies. But with 8base, I'm very happy because they've really understood developer advocacy in the way that it should be, in terms of making sure that all the decisions that we make for the product are for the developer. Okay. And then in terms of 8base, what 8base is we're a full stack low code platform. And what kind of separates us from the rest of the other low code platforms is that we are built specifically for developers, and more accurately, more for JavaScript developers. So the way that low code usually works is that in order for a low code platform to make things low code, they need to make decisions for the developer. This is how this should work. This is how this should look. Look. That way you drag and drop, make some changes, and that's how low code works. The difference for us is the two main things is, one, a lot of the decisions that we've made focus on things that the developers don't really care about. So things like the DevOps in the background, how things are scaled, how production stuff works. That's a big focus that we put. But also, we make sure that no matter what decisions we've put in place, the developer can add code, whether it's JavaScript or CSS. They can add code at any point that they need in order to accomplish their tasks.
Mm-hmm.
And then in terms, so one of the things that we do from a low code perspective in terms of what we're going to see today is as you're developing out your data layer, we're automatically generating a GraphQL API for the developer. So they
Mm-hmm.
don't have to worry about, implementing Apollo or figuring out how to integrate things. We're automatically creating the CRUD component of their GraphQL layer.
Yeah, for sure. I'm actually really excited to kind of dive a little bit deeper into the demo, but some questions, especially from our audience, since you and I are both dev advocates and you've had an experience background as a developer and now have moved into advocacy, we have a really interesting question about just like developer advocates and what developer advocates do. And it's a really interesting role, especially, and I'd love to get your perspective on it since you're an advocate for 8base, and yeah, I'd love to kind of get your background and understanding on your transition from development to advocacy as well.
Right. So basically, the way that I transitioned into developer advocacy is I started out as a developer. And then when I was moving from one company to another, I decided to transition and I was upskilling myself. I was going online, finding YouTube videos and online courses to make sure that I was up to date on things because I was working with an older technology. And I kind of was jealous about these people who are, their living was to show developers how to do things, which
Hmm.
seemed a lot of fun.
Yeah.
And then when I applied for one of my companies, I didn't get the job as an engineer, apparently because I was too honest and open about some of the things that I wanted
Mhm.
to get across as a developer. But then the HR person started talking about this other role, which was a developer advocate, and I got very excited about the idea and jumped on. And so, as a developer advocate, in terms of what a developer advocate does, we kind of have a few different branches. So a lot of times we're seen as the voice of the company for the developer, as well as the voice of the developer for the company.
Mhm.
So we go out and we give talks and we attend conferences and we put on workshops and we show the developer a developer exactly how to work with the product and how the product works, right? We also provide a supporting role in terms of, we make sure that developers understand things and if they're having problems. We tend to maintain communities in order
Mhm.
to, make sure that developers have access to support that they need. We're also the voice of the developer to the company. So part of what we do when we're out there is we take the feedback that developers get and we bring it to engineering. And that's one of the things that I love about 8base and why I joined 8base as an advocate, because they made it very clear that they want their advocates to be involved with product. They want product to be driven by what the developers' needs are.
Right.
So when I go out and I find out, developers are having issues with the way something works, and I go into our engineering meetings and I can get that feedback back to them. And then when they're planning features, if they're planning features that are more geared towards like more enterprise things and like things that developers would look at and be like, that's kind of, I get to be that voice for the developer. And the fact that
Mhm.
I have that experience as a developer for, I think it was a decade before I started doing this, really lets me provide the right kind of feedback.
Awesome. All right. Well, I kind of feel the same way, especially when it comes to advocacy for Postman, especially doing this live stream. I think we're going to be showing a lot of you guys, especially if you are GraphQL users, how to work with our new GraphQL features. Recently came out earlier this year, but there's a lot of interesting things. So with that, do you want to dive right in? Do you want to dive into kind of, 8base, what exactly it is, and then we can kind of take a look at how to work with some of the APIs you guys have?
Yeah, for sure. So 8base is a full stack low code platform, but we're not
Mhm.
really going to be focusing on the front end today because
Yeah.
GraphQL is really what we're talking about. But so we have kind of we what we try to do is try to low code a lot of the layers that a developer would normally work with. So in terms of a data layer, we have the ability for you to create your tables and add your fields in. We've tried to make things a little easier in terms of some of the types of fields. So we have like standards like text and number and stuff, but then we have a few more interesting ones that we could get into a bit later if we have time. But one of the cool things about it is as you're creating your tables and building out your data layer, we're automatically working on your API layer. Because the steps of a developer in creating an application are you create your data layer, and then you create your API layer, you secure your API layer, you put your business logic in. There's all these steps, and the big one of creating the API layer, we try to make a lot easier by automatically generating your GraphQL queries and mutations for you.
Yeah. So I'm curious. So like with 8base, like so is the product like it generates all of these layers? You can have it generate all of these like layers for you. So I think we have a question from our audience, especially about like what exactly are you modeling, whether that's a client request or like backend requests. Like how does this kind of all work in that
Right. So what you're modeling here is you're modeling your data structure. So here, like in this example that I use, this is a CRM app. So it's customer relationship management. And then so you have leads and you have accounts and documents. Let's say I wanted to like create like the ability to track events that that our people are going to. So I would create this layer, and as I start adding in things to model my layer out, say like my events have names, for example. So as I create my data layer, I come over here and I can see that under my queries, right? My events queries have already started to come in here. So I can list all my events. I can list specific events. And under mutations, I can automatically start creating events, deleting events. So all of the CRUD component of the data that you're modeling in your data layer is automatically being generated for you.
I see. Okay, cool.
Yeah. So there's the kind of steps that a developer goes through is they create their data layer, and then they create their API layer, and then they secure their API layer because they want to make sure that only certain people can access certain things. So we have an RBAC role-based access control built into 8base as well, which is very much point and click and makes things a lot easier. So you can specify exactly what types of data that they're allowed to access. And it goes a little deeper too, because it's not just about the rows that they're able to access. It's also about the fields that they're able to access. So for example, let's say your users had social security numbers in their data, and you didn't want anybody, or you didn't want, let's say, developers to be able to access that when they're troubleshooting. You could create a developer role, and then under custom access specify like, I don't want them seeing a specific field, for example.
Okay.
So the RBAC layer is also taken care of. And then we also have custom functions, which is basically like a serverless function layer, because what we're saying that we're building out your GraphQL API, but every developer knows that like an API is more than just CRUD. You have specific business logic that you need to resolve in there. And so that's why we have our custom functions, is to create the ability to add custom endpoints to your GraphQL. So for example, I have like a convert lead resolver right here. And then if I go over into my API Explorer, you can see that I have this convert lead mutation. So you can use custom like serverless JavaScript functions in order to extend your GraphQL API, as well as do a few other things like cron jobs and create REST endpoints if that's something that you need in your backend, that type of functionality.
Okay, so your GraphQL, can you dive a little bit deeper into your GraphQL API? Like, so you have a lot of different queries that we're going to be exploring. So this is your API Explorer to explore your GraphQL API. And I guess this is where I guess we can like kind of collaborate with Postman as well, right?
Yeah. So, I mean, this really gives us, the API Explorer gives us a couple of things to do. One, we can actually see and explore the API itself. So it's very
Mhm.
much, and I think this is similar to what a lot of people have done in terms of GraphQL exploration.
Mhm.
So you could come in here and check your layers out, check your endpoints out, and generate the queries that you want, generate the mutations that you want. So we give the point and click over here. We also have our documentation that allows you to, sort through all of the different data types that are available and endpoints that are available.
Yeah.
So you can work through that. Obviously, a prettify function. And one of the other cool things to note is that if you're going to be working with 8-base, we are built as an API first model.
Mhm.
So you can see that we have things like, we have our events and we have our accounts, the things that we've created in the in the tables. But we also have things like the system endpoint and the table endpoint and the table field. So because we're API first, everything that you're seeing being done in this console here, you could do as a developer. You could use the GraphQL API to create tables if you wanted to, or
Okay.
to, to update table structures, for example.
Right. And you're saying that that's some of those are the endpoints that are available in those
Yeah, so that's
queries.
some of the things that you're seeing here, like table,
Okay.
teams, users. These are system endpoints to
Mhm.
your project itself.
Yeah. So we have one question from the audience about 8-base. So does the 8-base also handle like the user experience?
UX in terms of what do you mean? Like I'm wondering what they mean in terms of like a
Yeah.
front end. So we
Yeah.
have like a front end app builder,
Hmm.
which is the ability to create a front end application. And the
Hmm.
app builder itself is not restricted to 8-base backends.
Hmm.
So you don't need to use an 8-base backend uh, to work with an 8-base front end, and you don't need to have all of your data sitting in an 8-base backend. You can come over here, and these are all of my 8-base backends, but I can add any GraphQL or REST API to this front end that I want to,
Okay. Cool.
right? And so with the app builder, you can actually create the application that you want from the front end, and then I like doing it this way because I did a couple of tweaky things, but and then you deploy it and it builds out your application to the way that you need it.
Nice. All right. So you're saying that you can use like the GraphQL APIs to kind of like build all the backend out, and you have a specific like front end builder as well.
Yes, exactly. So we have backend, and backend as a service was kind of where we started. It was like
Hmm.
our initial bread and butter, but we wanted to be a full stack. And so now we have this app builder, which allows you to build front ends. And because a backend is a backend, it's not limited to 8-base front ends, and 8-base front ends aren't limited to 8-base backends either.
Right. All right, cool. So it seems like people are really excited about the schema, how to work with the schema. So I know that you also with this particular GraphQL API, y'all have set up introspection, right? So
Yeah.
we can kind of use that to kind of see and dive a little bit deeper into the APIs themselves. So
Yeah.
you want to talk a little bit about that?
Sure. So, I mean, this is built as an API, as like a standard GraphQL API. It uses GraphQL standards. We recently had someone asking if it works with, what is it, Apollo Federation,
Hmm.
which I think is like your ability to piece GraphQL APIs together,
Hmm.
and it does. It works because we're using GraphQL standards. So you can just take your GraphQL endpoint and then in
Into
Postman, for
yeah.
example, we could come in here and we can create a new GraphQL
Right.
workspace and just put the URL in.
Cool. Yeah.
And then when
So
we have that and that kicks off,
we can
we
see it.
get this list here.
Awesome. Yeah. So with for those of you who are a little bit new to working with GraphQL and Postman, Postman supports introspection now. So if you have a GraphQL API schema that has that enabled, if you just put that in the URL, you're able to now, it looks like we're able to see your entire query list.
Hmm.
You have you have mutations in there too. And then I think you have all of your subscriptions in there as well.
Correct.
So yeah, so basically everything that is available in your schema, I think you can kind of work with. We have one question from our audience, so I'm going to pull it up. So, so how capable is 8base to manipulate the database, such as triggers and things like that? So, yeah.
So, I mean, part of what we're trying to do as a low code platform is extrapolate some of that stuff
Mhm.
away. Like, and as depending on what your data needs are, sometimes you do need to get a lot more advanced with your SQL. So the extent of what we allow from our 8-base console perspective is that you can create views for your data if that's something that you want to do. You can also manage the indexes of the database so that if you need to increase the performance, that's kind of the big dig deep in there. One of the things that we can say from like a trigger perspective is that one of the custom functions that we allow here for you to create is the ability to create triggers based on data.
Mhm.
So, for example, for this application, I have a trigger here that before before a lead is deleted, it checks to see whether or not you're doing a delete or a destroy.
Mhm.
So we don't allow, like for this CRM application, we don't want them to be able to destroy data, just delete it.
Mhm.
So what we've done is we've created a before trigger, and you can
Mhm.
create triggers both before and after any of your main data components are being manipulated. So deleted, updated, created.
Okay, great. Yeah, I think that's pretty interesting. I think you have a specific example, especially when it comes to customs functions. But do you want to dive right in and like look at what it looks like when we send queries and things like that?
Yeah, for sure. So, I mean, one of the first things that we're going to have to do, because like if I create a collection here,
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to call this a CRM light collection,
Great. And then
and I'm going to save this request. Let's say I want to like get leads, right? So I'm going to create a get leads request, but I know that as soon as I go and try to do this, it's going to break because we don't have any authentication built in,
okay,
right? So
the query.
we use OAuth for our authentication, but you can also use bearer tokens. So yeah, we don't have permission to perform the operation. So what I can do from like an 8-base perspective is for Postman, I would generate an API token, and that API token would allow me to operate as a specific role. And then here, over on the Postman side, what I would have to do is go into my query and into my author. Now, what's the best way to do this? Because I feel like right now I'm just creating an authorization for this
Yeah.
specific query, right?
Yeah, so I mean, one of the ways that like I like doing it, especially if you know that your token's going to change often,
Mm-hmm.
if you use like the handlebar notation for a variable. So if you do like handlebar, like in that token, handlebar token or auth, yep, and then end that with the handle, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Now that's a variable. So that variable is going to show up in your, you can use that as a collection variable. So
Okay.
if you go to your left hand where it says collections, so in that CRM Lite collection, if you click on that folder, right, just on that folder itself, where it says variables, you can add a
I
variable
see.
right there. So if you
The
wanted
auth
to,
token,
yeah. So if
and I
you
put
wanted
my
to,
variable in there. I'm gonna
yeah,
do this because we're on a live stream, so I'm not gonna post any any
yeah.
authorization tokens directly on a live stream.
Mhm.
We go there. And hit save. Is there like a hide feature on this or no?
So with so with you can use environment variables if you wanted to do like a secret token sort of thing.
And that
So
would
so that would hide the token itself.
okay.
We're using collection variables. So with Postman, you can put your variables as like collection variables, environment variables, global variables. So in this case, we're just using it as a collection variable. So everything's going to be contained to that collection. But
Right.
if you want, I think like the better practice would be like using an environment variable.
Okay.
So like on the left-hand side where you see environments right
Let
there.
me pull this back while I got a second.
Yeah. Yeah. So technically you can create like that sandbox. Yeah. So where it says type right there, you can do secret and
Okay.
that'll like hide your thing in there too. So
Oh, I
that's
see.
that's an
So
option as well.
let me make sure that I hide that. Okay. So yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's
Yeah.
just hidden in there.
Yeah. So now where it
Got
says no
save.
environments on the top right-hand corner,
Okay.
you'll need to pick where
Sandbox.
you see that environment. So
So I
yeah.
put this in the sandbox. No, I put this in the globals.
Yeah, I think you put that in the global. So then go into the globals, I think. So
I don't see a globals here.
so that's, I guess you have the global environment variable, which will encapsulate your entire workspace.
Okay.
So that sandbox variable, if you wanted to like share that environment variable with your teammates, so you can export that environment variable out. So if somebody's creating a workspace, they can import it. So either way, you have it in globals, you have it in, but I just wanted to show you that's how you can kind of work with like hidden variables and
Right.
stuff.
Okay. So if
Yeah.
I wanted to use that here for my authorization, well,
Yeah.
not here,
I mean, it'll still
but
work
over
because right
here.
now you have it as a global variable. So, yeah, whatever that
Right
was.
there.
Yep. Yep. That
So
should
if I
work.
do that and then I run the query,
Yeah. So see what you get in your response.
oh, there you go.
Cool. All right. So, yeah.
That's awesome. So if I
Yeah.
go back and I think I only had count selected. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So where's my items? There we go. I want
There we
all
go.
the information for all the items. Then I click it there and look at my response. Perfect.
Yeah. Cool. So now go back to your collections just because I think we're looking at environments. So,
Sure.
I mean, if you want to hide that sidebar as well,
This one?
or just like,
Oh,
push it.
do collections and then do that.
Yeah, just so you have a fuller screen view. Cool. Awesome.
And so the query, this is and this is kind of a similar selector in
Mm-hmm.
terms of what we have on our API Explorer. I think yours is a little better because we don't have
Mm-hmm.
this ability to click items and have everything underneath it
Right.
selected. I think that's
Mm-hmm.
very useful.
Yeah. So this is neat because you can like select, deselect, do a lot of that kind of
Mm,
stuff. So, because I think what this kind of gets the query of everything, right? So, like
mm.
everything that you have available in your database, right? Like your names and emails and all of that. So,
Yeah.
yeah, can you talk a little bit about like like the query you sent versus the responses you get and things like that?
Well, yeah. I mean, one of the things that I like to bring up about GraphQL, and I think someone in the comments made a point that GraphQL is not clean.
Mm-hmm.
I think we come from, where everybody's used to REST, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the fact that you have your standard endpoints in REST, and it's pretty clean because each like data that you want to access has its own endpoint. But you run into some inherent problems that I think
Mm-hmm.
GraphQL really solves. So, like
Mm-hmm.
for example, I have like a leads page, right? And or let's not do leads because I'm trying to think. No, let's do leads. Okay, so I have like a leads page, and you can
Mm-hmm.
see here in my example. And do I still have this up? Yeah. So in my leads, I have my leads, and my leads have associated to them things like notes and documents. Please don't mind this UI. I suck at being a designer, so if this doesn't look good to you, it's just because I'm a crappy designer. Uh, but so leads have notes, and they have documents, and they have an owner, and these are all their own entities. Now, if we
Mm-hmm.
were doing this from a REST perspective, what we would do is we would go out and we would get the lead data, right? And that would give me all of the lead information, regardless of whether or not I wanted it. And then I would have to go out and get the list of notes for the lead, and that would come back. And then I'd have to go out and get the list of documents. And I'd get back with my leads information, I'd get back the ID of the owner. So I'd have to go out and get the owner information, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's 4 requests just for one page. And all of the data I'm getting back is coming back to me regardless of whether or not I want it. So here, right, I only need the avatar for the owner, the first name, the last name, and maybe the ID if I wanted to make this clickable. But I'm going to get all of that owner information because that's what REST sends back. But with GraphQL, if I wanted to do that information, I could create this query saying I want to get the list information, and then for the owner, I want the first name, the last name, and where's their avatar? The avatar, the download URL for the avatar, right?
Mm-hmm.
So only the information that I need for this specific page. And then also, I want my documents. So I can come back. Where is the documents? Okay, so my documents. And my documents, all I really need for this page is I want, oh yeah, for the documents, I need the title and I need the download URL for the file. That's all I really care about, right? And then the same thing for the notes. And what I'm doing is I'm only getting back the data that I really care about for my page, and I'm getting it all in one call. So I don't have to go back to the API 4 times in order to get all that information I need for one page, because GraphQL allows you to make multiple queries in one call and allows you to dig into the entities that you're working at when you're making your query. I can do everything in one call, and I can limit it to only the stuff that I want. Right?
Yeah, for sure. I think like the way I like to think about GraphQL is like with like a vending machine, right? You have to like specify exactly like A4, right? And you get your chips or whatever, right? So do you feel like that's more of like a REST model because you have to send that like A4 like every single time to get all your data, whereas like GraphQL you get a bigger data dump, I guess, based on exactly what queries you select, essentially.
Yeah, no, exactly. You can be very particular about
Hmm.
how much or how little data you get back, and
Right.
depending on the implementation of GraphQL, you can get as specific as you want. So if you look
Hmm.
here, when we're building out, when 8base is building out this CRUD stuff, we're including the ability to filter, the ability to order, the ability to sort. You can grab the first or the last,
Hmm.
and you can do grouping. All of that is kind of built right into the GraphQL and really lets you fine tune exactly what you're trying to get for that page. And then you can always execute a query with multiple. Like you can make a call to a GraphQL API with multiple queries. So here
Right.
I got the leads list, but
Hmm.
if I want to get more data that isn't even associated to leads, I can put that into the same call.
Right. 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 And that's interesting because you're using one URL. Like with Postman, I mean, sorry, with REST, you have to specify each endpoint, right?
Right.
With each ID, with whatever you're searching, right? With parameters, with GraphQL here, you just kind of have it all in that one essentially like query.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
you're
and I
not.
think that can also be a bit of a personal preference. I know that some
Mhm,
people like the idea of having different endpoints for different data,
mhm,
and some people like the idea of I just have one place that I can go for everything, right? And
mhm.
it's like for everything. So, for example, in order for us to do this introspection, I just gave the URL to the API. And
Mhm.
when I implement in development on the front end, I use that exact same URL. So it makes things simpler, right?
Yeah. So for just folks that are maybe a little newer to GraphQL, so queries allow you to do like that search, correct? And
Yeah,
then
yeah, and in REST, right? It's
like a get request.
get request, post request, put request, delete
Hmm.
request, right?
Right. So right now with this query, essentially what you're doing is you're basically going through your database and you're searching for all of these fields, essentially, correct?
Yeah, I'm looking for all of the leads, the information for leads, and I don't really need updated at, deleted at,
Nice.
created that kind of stuff. So I
Cool.
can
Wait,
just
can
do
I
that.
see what the response looks like again?
Yeah, so I execute that query, and you can see I have the leads list, and then for the items, I've got all the information, and then the
Hmm.
owner, right? Because I dug down, the owner's information is still tied into the lead right there.
Hmm.
The documents for each one of the documents, it's tied in.
Hmm.
And then I didn't end up selecting the notes, but I could have done that same thing.
Right.
And then so one of the things that we try to make easier with 8base as well is that we have file management built into it,
Right. Right.
right? So here you can see like the owner has an avatar, And in our database, that avatar is a file field. And
Mm-hmm.
so that file field has a whole bunch of information related to the actual file. So let me go down to owner, avatar, right? All I cared about was the download URL, but we have the same like created at, created by, a file ID, who the provider is, whether or not there's a share URL, all of that capability built right in for files.
Cool. I think the interesting thing is that you always get a 200. So like
Yeah.
regardless of if you had no data or not, it would just show like no data, but it would still come out as like, I mean, even with the
Yeah.
get
So
request.
if I did like filter where the person's first name is Chicken.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think I have anyone in here named Chicken.
Mm-hmm.
I still would get a 200 back, but then my count would be 0 and I just wouldn't have
Mm-hmm.
any items.
Items list. Okay, cool. Yeah, we have this comment in the chat. So about secure, I guess performance with GraphQL, and I'd love to get your insight on that. So we lose performance with GraphQL, but we gain a lot of development time. Like, what are your thoughts on that?
Um, I would have to investigate that personally.
Yeah.
I don't think I've experienced GraphQL on a high data, like a large data level.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure what that is.
Hmm.
If who was that was saying that? Victor?
Victor. Yeah.
Yeah, so if Victor is saying that, I'm assuming Victor's done some research and some experience, so they know, they know that there maybe is a performance
Yeah.
hit. But I've worked with I'm not going to say large data. I've worked with a decent amount of data
Okay.
and haven't had too many issues. But I think they're right in the sense that there's more computing necessary, right?
Yeah.
Instead of just doing a take everything and figure everything out, there's computing that has to go in order to figure out exactly the fields you're looking for. But there's other things to take into account as well, things
Yeah.
like bandwidth, right? Like
Yeah.
if I'm asking for just certain fields, then I'm not getting everything back at once, right? So while there is maybe performance on the server side, in transit, you should definitely have things a little bit better.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's interesting because it's like if you think about a REST API, right? You'd have to call like certain REST APIs like n number of times to get all the data you need versus like with
Hmm.
the GraphQL API, you might need to only call it like once or
Right.
twice,
That
right?
goes back to what I had said there, right? Like
Right.
if I'm in terms of looking at this, right, the call might be longer, but
Right.
I only make one call.
Right.
Whereas if I was using REST, I would make a call for the lead data, I'd make a call for the owner data, I'd make a call for the notes, I'd make a call
Mhm.
for the documents.
Right, 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 right. We have another comment, just something that maybe we can discuss. Like, I
Sure.
think we have someone on the chat. So something about just like open data and security. So we have Marcin. Forgive me if I'm pronouncing it wrong, but something about working on open data without any security. So any thoughts on just like GraphQL security? Uh,
Um, I mean, our GraphQL API
mhm,
works with OAuth. It works under SSL, so everything is secure in transit.
mhm,
So I'd be interested to learn more about
mhm,
what Marcin. I hope I'm
mhm,
pronouncing it right. About what Marcin means about
mhm.
that. But we and anybody who reputably implements a GraphQL API should be doing it under SSL
Mhm.
and should make sure that they have proper authentication in place. But
Yeah,
judging from some of the comments, I think Marcin is very big on security, which
right.
is a very important topic these days, especially with how our data is being shared and how much
Mhm.
of data we have, right?
Yep. Cool. All right. So someone's asking about how we integrate with GraphQL with Postman. So if you are just joining the stream, we're actually working with 8base's GraphQL data using Postman. So we ran a couple of queries. Do you want to? So let's do the equivalent of creating data. So
Yeah, sure.
let's create someone named Chicken.
Okay, so here I can go into my mutations, so if you're used to the REST world, A mutation is basically the CUD part of your CRUD, right? It's the ability to manipulate data. So let's say I was working with my leads and I wanted to create a lead, right? So I can look under the mutations and see I have the capability to do a bunch of different things. I can create many, I can delete one, I can delete by filter. Same thing with destroy. If you're not used to the concept of delete and destroy, delete is a soft delete, meaning the data becomes generally unavailable but still sits in the database. Whereas destroy like actually makes sure that it's removed from the data storage. And then so lead restore would help with a lead delete functionality. And then I can update a lead as well as any resolvers that I created that were mutations. So for a lead, let's say I wanted to create a lead, and I want to put in my data here. So one of the cool things to note is that I have my query here, but then I have my mutation down here. And one of the cool things that I like about Postman is that if you could see, I have my query and it's definitely more visible than my mutation that seems to be a little bit grayed out. But if I click over into the mutation, or maybe I need to actually start putting things in.
Yeah.
First name, last name. There we go. Or what did I just do there? Did I break something?
First name, last name.
I think I broke something because I see
No,
this.
I think you just created another mutation.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Not to make things confusing. So first name and last name, and I think I need it. So I see this exclamation point here. So I definitely need to make sure that I have a status in here. So
Okay, cool. Actually, for some reason, I didn't know that's what the exclamation point. So that's a required, right? Essentially.
yeah, so at least in our world, and I'm pretty sure most of the GraphQL world, an exclamation point means it's a requirement.
Okay, cool.
So up here you can see, right, that you need to have a lead create input required for data in order to do your lead create. So I'm going to add chicken farmer, and that's a new person, right? So as you see, this is coming down here, and there's my lead create. So once I hit that, and because lead create is highlighted, that'll execute. Oh, great. What did I do? What did I break? Oh, yeah. So the problem that I did is I didn't ask for any data back. So not only does it want the creation to happen, but what do you want to know when we get it back? So pretty much I just want to know the ID unless I'm creating a view that needs a first name, last name. But that's another cool piece too, right? Is that I can request data back in the mutation as well. That's the data specific to really just what I need.
Right.
So if all I need is the ID, perfect. But if I want to get the created user back, and let's say in the back end I have a trigger that manipulates the data around and moves things or changes things or calculates new fields, right? I can get that information right back from the mutation.
Right.
So I could do that, and then let's hit that, and now I've got a 200. And you can see the data that came back from the lead create was everything that I requested.
Right. Cool. That's cool. So it looks like so I mean, one thing like with Postman, like it sounds like, it's cool that you were able to see that like mutation hard coded, right? So I don't know if you've like worked with variables with Postman, but you can actually set those as variables. And I wanted to show you a little bit about scripts too, especially if you wanted to send something before a query was sent or an after a query was sent. So
Okay.
some things that we can kind of take a look at just on the Postman side as well. So
well, let's figure out the variable thing.
All right, so let's start with variables. So let's take a look at creating those first name, last names as variables. So on the bottom where you see variables, I think if you like pull that up, yeah, there we go. So like the GraphQL notation. So let's just do like name, first name, last name variables. Or
this is going to be JSON, right?
yeah, quotations, and then if you want to use Postman variables, yeah, so you can hard code it, of course, like that. So let's just try that. Let's try that first. And so let's put that back into the query editor.
Do that, and then in the query editor, we would, if I'm not mistaken, we need to specify the variable here, right?
Yes. Yep.
First name, which is a string.
Yep.
Last name, which is a string, and status, which is a required string. And then over
Great.
here, we would specify first, by typing them, first name, at, I guess I could probably make things a little easier by doing that. Last name, perfect.
Cool. Okay, so,
So, and then if,
let's just see if that works. All
perfect.
right, so we got that. So now let's create those as collection variables
Okay.
or environment variables. So this is the same thing that we talked about when we were working with the tokens. So you're going to want to use that curly braces.
The handlebars?
Yep, the handlebars. Yep, the handlebars for both of those, and yep, and you can set those. Let's set that as a collection variable.
Those need to be inside of the quotes, correct?
Yeah. Yep.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. So
Okay. And then
in your collection itself. So if you look at
here,
the variables there,
yeah,
right there, so you can add those bars right there. So whatever you had there.
first name. I'm creating a lot of chicken farmers.
Okay, let's actually populate these bars dynamically. We can use scripts. So don't put anything in there.
Okay.
Let's go back to the request itself.
So don't put the variables or create them with no value.
Yeah, create them with no value.
Okay.
Yep. So create them with no value, and then
back in here.
Yeah. So now let's go to scripts.
Okay.
Cool. So we can set some scripts before the query itself is run. So if you go to before query, you can. There should be on the side. There should be a snippet that says set collection variable. So you just add that collection variable key. So whatever you want, and then you can add your like variable value there as well.
Okay. You said dynamic though.
Yeah. So in the sense that if you wanted to,
okay,
you can put some logic in this script as well. So
right.
You can also, like, for example, like we can play around with there's some clear collection variables as well. So we can do like, yeah, exactly. So you want to do some sort of like random each time this like is set.
Do a toString. Let's do a toString just to be safe.
Yeah. So for those of you who haven't worked with Postman scripts, so we use Chai.js, so you can work with a lot of like JS libraries as well.
Okay.
So let's just see what that looks like. I just want to see if it works. And like, let's do an after response. So let's look at what a script looks like. So some snippets. These are just some tests. So you can specify a specific property. So it could have like, you can expect data if you wanted.
So if I looked here, data, does it assume data here when it shows that example?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Data to have property, and then what do we want? Lead create?
Yeah, let's just look at that. Let's just see what it looks like.
What are the two? Do you know? Or is it checking multiple properties, or it's checking the value of the property?
I think it's checking the value. Yeah, so I think it could be like something, and then whatever that property is. So like maybe like.
Oh, it's a message.
Yeah. All right.
Yep.
Let's see.
Let's execute it, see what happens.
And then in general, like you could do like test response. You can test the time as well. I don't know if for those performance people.
Oh, look at that.
Oh, nice.
I got my weird one there. What? Something is wrong with my script, I think, for the. Oh, ha! Cool. That's my own fault. I put first name twice.
Okay. And then last name. Yep.
Where would I see the after?
So right there. So you see that test script, right? Test results right there. So you see that there's a issue right there. So
lead create, have property lead create of lead create exists.
Yeah. So if you also go to that console on the bottom down there, you can also like do a little bit of debugging there. So I mean, if you send that query again, it'll show what that log is.
Oh, I see.
Yeah. So I think it should. Oh, I'm curious why it didn't show. Huh. We're seeing this live actually.
Let's not do that.
Yeah. All right.
Okay.
Not
Well,
sure
I
about
think even based off that information from the test
that.
result,
Hmm.
I would speculate that if I did response would have data lead create ID.
Yeah, I think if you do like, let's see, what do you have that static? So like in that response,
So
like if you
my
do
assumption being,
status is new, I wonder if that's the property it will test for.
oh, would I have to do this then?
Yeah, let's just let's just try that. Just see if it works.
Hey, there we go. Okay,
Okay, there
cool.
we go. So you can test for exact like property output as well. So that's cool. I don't know if that's something like people who want to validate some like sort of responses.
Yeah, for sure.
So this is how you can kind of like test with GraphQL with Postman. You can like set queries. So now, now that you've set those random variables, it looks like that. If you go to your collection variables, again, it looks like
Oh, right there.
yeah. So you're seeing that those
Okay.
values are consistently changing each time
Yeah.
you
So
like send a request.
333, and then if I
Hmm.
execute that again,
Yeah.
now it's 8080. Yeah. Okay. Cool.
Right. Yeah, so that's one thing that you can do. I know that you guys work with a lot of random data. So I think the other thing I wanted to show you is
Oh yeah.
like with Postman, we have a lot of. I mean, you're working with the math.random, but we have the random library as well.
Right. Because I mean, chicken.
Mm-hmm.
It's a terrible first name
Yep.
for a
Mm-hmm.
lead. Chicken. Blah blah blah.
Mm-hmm.
Zero
Mm-hmm.
dot. Okay.
Yeah. So let's go back to the variables in the query itself. So you can do that, but let's go, yeah, right there.
So should I comment this out? Or no, we're not gonna use.
Yeah,
Okay.
we're gonna use that. So let's use the random first name library. So it should be $sign actually.
Random first name.
Yep. And then I think the same thing, $sign random last name. Yeah. And we'll keep the status as is. So let's see what that query looks like. So are you getting, yeah, so cool. So you're getting random data
Oh,
each and
that's
every.
awesome.
Yeah. So
That's
these
great
are.
from like a testing perspective and the
Mhm.
ability to, like, if you wanted to pre-populate like
Yep.
your database, your staging or development database with some real data.
Hmm.
Because I remember when I was creating this CRM application, like you look here and you see this list. I went to a website and I was like, give me this information. And then I
Hmm.
started manually putting this stuff in,
Hmm.
which was not a fun experience.
Yeah, I mean, you could do random addresses, random ints, random colors, like the random library, which is already like pre-built into Postman, allows you to do quite a bit. So you don't
Well,
even need to script that. So you add,
now I'm upset that I didn't know about this earlier. I
yeah,
wasted so much time finding fake data.
yeah,
So could I
yeah,
do random email?
yeah. I think so. I
Let's
think they
test
have a
that.
random email. Try it out.
Um, okay, my mutation. I want to include an email. I mean, I could do that or I could do this, right?
Hmm.
If I wanted to be a developer and code just as a developer, not point and click. Nope. Email. Add an email as a string. And then over in my variables, I have email as a random email.
Hmm.
I'm assuming there's some documentation somewhere to figure out
Yeah,
all of these randoms.
yeah. Let me pull that up. Let me see if I can send it to you. Uh,
Oh, I didn't ask for the email back.
there we go. Um, I'm just going to send it to you in this chat that we have. The learning doc. I don't know if you want to pull it up on your screen. Yeah. So
Oh,
dynamic
cool.
variables. So these are all the, you can
Random
do
colors. Nice.
mhm,
Random abbreviations.
random passwords, random addresses. So,
Random IPs.
mhm,
Random max. Random protocol. Random first name. Random prefix. Job titles.
mhm.
Oh, wow. phone numbers, street name, street address. Oh, there's no street address too. Well, this whole thing is just gone to. I'm just
You
kidding.
know what's so funny? In the chat, someone was like talking about like, oh, like that's like not that cool. And then they're like, oh, I take my words back.
Yeah.
Random use case is cool. Yeah, I guess it is. It's useful. So
It's not useful like to like implement into a system as a developer, but from like a testing and a data population perspective, it's
yeah.
pretty badass.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of people don't know about a lot of like interesting, unique things that Postman has, but there's a lot of pre-built libraries with Postman. So definitely makes your testing a lot easier using some of these like
Oh man, look at
pre-built
that.
stuff. So
So pretty.
yeah. Recording of this is going to be available on YouTube. So feel free to watch this back. If you go to Postman YouTube, you'll be able to see all of the recordings of all of our live streams and previous live streams. So you can always take a look at that. So I'll just post a link in the chat about that. Just for others. But yeah, I think I'm glad we were able to kind of test that out a little bit. I'm curious, like when it comes to testing GraphQL APIs, what do you care for, Ray? Like,
If you're asking on a personal level, I'm one of those horrible developers who don't test.
what?
Yeah. My
Don't
testing
say
is
that.
I create a node script that'll run something and hope that things work out, and then look at it and then throw console logs in lines trying to figure out things. Like I'm really bad about that.
Okay, but like, what do you think would be worth testing if you were into testing?
Like you want to test that you get a response back, that you want to test that you can send some data and expect a typical response of that data in return, basically.
But
Right?
do you
Those are
care
kind of,
about like validation of certain properties? Because this is a good test for that, I think.
yeah. I mean, there's a few things you want to test from that. You want to test that that the properties that come back are the data type and the data that you're expecting, but you also want to test that if you send the wrong stuff, that your API is going to handle it accordingly, right?
Cool. We got a question. So, question: Can GraphQL APIs handle streams? I'm not really sure.
Well, I mean, GraphQL APIs have subscription capabilities.
Yes. Yes.
Um,
So, if they're talking about that, so we went through what? We went through query. We went through mutation.
yeah, and there's also subscription.
Right. So,
And I would love to show it off, honestly, but I haven't figured it out yet, to be honest. Like I tried, I tried doing it, and I couldn't get my engineering team back to me fast enough for this to figure it out. But the way that it does work from a GraphQL perspective is essentially with WebSockets, which is
so yeah.
the standard for streams these days. So
Right. If you want to just showcase like streams at a very basic level,
yeah, for sure. What do you got?
let's do this. So let me give you this. Let's create a new GraphQL request. So go back to your collections. Just create a new GraphQL request. Let me give you the URL. So I posted this URL in the chat.
Oh yeah, you have this. It's like
So
Postman has like this whole GraphQL
Yep.
area.
So
Well, it's not actually going to run anything, but yeah, there we go.
Yeah, let's go to the mutation or the subscription, I guess. So this is just like a greeting subscription. So if you query that, you'll see like in the response, you should see all the WebSocket queries of that stream. The interesting thing is that with the messages right there, so if you click on all messages on the side, you can filter by like responses or whatever you want.
I see.
So
Yeah.
that's an interesting way to work with like different WebSockets and stuff with streams. So yeah. So that's like just one basic example. So our Echo service, so for those of you who are just like learning GraphQL, kind of new to GraphQL, this, if you put that into any of your GraphQL URLs, you can kind of play around with mutations and variables and subscriptions and things like that. So it's definitely worth a look. So Yeah, I might let me add some GraphQL learning stuff in the chat. But I think we had a couple of other things on our agenda, Ray.
Okay.
So we went through working with variables. So that was, I'm glad you found the random stuff kind of cool. You were going to show how to create custom endpoints.
Right. So, I mean, basically what it is from our perspective, you have your API layer that's your CRUD, but then you also want to do other things that aren't just CRUD. So for example, here, like you can see, I've got a bunch of different resolvers that I've created. So this resolver here, for example, takes in a lead identifier and then converts that lead into an account, into a contact, into an opportunity, and then deletes the lead and returns all of that information back. So by using serverless functions, and like if I wanted to, I could just say 8-base generate resolver. Like if I did like a say hello, for example, right? Then we create kind of the data structure that you need. With the GraphQL schema that you want to say,
Oh, that's cool.
right, with a
Mhm.
result.
Mhm.
And you would do that. We also have mocks, like we
Mhm.
automatically put mocks in there. So you can
Mhm.
do this and say data, right, like a hello message. Pull that out and just have the data. And then the handler itself, which we generate, we give a bunch of information up at the top here, and it's generated in TypeScript. So all of our stuff supports TypeScript as well. And then here you would put in your information. So here,
Mhm.
right, was the message, and then the result that I'm coming back. And I could say something like that, for example.
Mhm.
What did I want to say about this? So an interesting thing to note about this is that all of the compilation and deployment happens like locally. Like you could set up CI/CD to work this, or you can do it locally. But if you have private npm repos, for example, where you have libraries that you want to access, you can do that and still remain secure because everything gets compiled in your compilation environment that has access to those libraries and then pushes it up to 8-base, as an example.
Mhm. Mhm.
So let's say I did this and then I did like an 8-base deploy. Once I have that, what it'll do is it'll actually like do all the TypeScript validation and make sure of everything. So what did I do? Oh, haha. See, it's gonna break because you need that.
Right.
Sorry. Perfect. So it's going to do all of that compilation and validation. Now there are 4 different types of functions, custom functions that you can create. The first is a resolver. Oh, here we go. Message does not exist on type. Okay, event dot data dot message. Did I get it right this time? All right. So the first is a resolver, which is what we're seeing here. And the resolver gives you the ability to extend your GraphQL API with endpoints that you want. The second type of custom function that you can generate and create is called a webhook. And essentially what the webhook does is it gives you the ability to create a REST endpoint inside of your 8-base project. So if you're working with third-party services that don't support GraphQL and they're expecting a REST endpoint to hit, you can create a webhook and that'll give you that capability. The third type of function that you can create is called a task. And a task can
Mhm.
be either a scheduled task, like a cron job,
Mhm.
or it can be a task that you create if you're implementing, for example, like a long running process, something that's going to take like 3 minutes and you don't want to hold up your request. So you can create a task and then have like a resolver call that task and it'll execute in the background. And then the last one you can create, which I went through before, is a trigger, which is the ability to execute code either before or after data has been manipulated. So
Right.
like you can do a before to validate that the data that's come in, or you can do an after to, let's say, send an email saying that an entity has been created. But if you look here, I did an 8-base deploy on that resolver, and then over on my API Explorer, if I go under Explorer, under my queries, you can see that I have, what did I call it? Hello?
Yeah.
Say hello, say hello. So I have that say hello right there. And if I come back into GraphQL here, or into Postman, I should be able to reload my introspection, and then I have my say hello here. So I can say
That's
hello
cool.
and then enter the message, which is boo. I don't know what's going on there. I'm going to do it over here. Boo, and then execute, and the response coming back. Okay, must have a, oh, did I not select the result? There we go. Okay.
Wow, that was the first time I saw a 400 request. That was kind of cool, actually.
Oh, it's another bad request.
Yeah.
What's going on here? Oh, what did I do?
I think there's a couple. I think there's a couple of queries in there. Just see if you want to delete some. I don't know.
Because I wonder if there's some kind of thing about this.
Mm-hmm. Let's try that. Did that work?
There we go.
There
you
we go.
Thanks for the boo. Hello to you.
Cool.
So yeah,
That's
so I was
cool.
able to create a serverless function and deploy it, and then it ends up being a GraphQL resolver.
Yeah, I like that you can see it automatically when you just refresh the introspection. Like that's pretty neat that you can test it as you develop essentially. So like is that the use case that you see for people? Like they're developing these custom functions as they go?
Yeah. So I mean that's part of one of the things that I mean about the fact that when we create our when we make our decisions, we're trying to keep the developer in mind. So we know that every GraphQL API needs CRUD, but at the same time, an API is more than just CRUD; it's business logic. So what we're doing is, as a developer, when you first create your API, it can be tedious and annoying in the sense that like you're doing the same thing over and over again, right? I create my API. So if I'm working in Node, then I install Express.js and I create my endpoints. And those endpoints have to do queries and get the information back and blah, blah, blah. And as a developer, like this is the boring part of being a developer. Like I want to solve the business problems, and I have to create my REST API again in order to get to the fun stuff.
Right.
So here at 8base, we're like, let us create the same stuff that you're always creating over and over again, and you can move it right into creating these functions and solving your own business logic. Right.
So how would you say like somebody would get started with this? Like are they like create an account, like look at the
Yeah.
documents?
So from an 8base perspective, you would go to which one is that? The incognito one. Perfect. So you go to 8base.com, right, and you sign up for an account, try for free, and then once you're signed up and you're in, you'll get to. Let me go back to my one that I've already logged into. Once you're signed up and in, you'll get to this section here, which has all your projects, and so every project has a backend, and the backend is everything that we've been seeing from a backend perspective. But then it also has the ability to create a front end, and not just one front end. You can have multiple front ends in one 8base application, in one 8base project.
So you're saying that you can, so if you have multiple front ends, you can basically use like the same like GraphQL APIs essentially for the backend.
Yeah, and I mean, in essence, you can use any 8base GraphQL API with any front end. This is more from like an organizational perspective, right? You know that this backend, these front ends are very specific to this backend. And then if you want, like, and you're in that front end, you can come here and say, not only am I accessing the CRM Lite one, I need to also access this Academy one, right? And you just click it and hit save, and now you have access to that GraphQL API as well.
So I remember, I think you were showing this. So like with Postman, when you were sending a query, where does that show up on the database on GraphQL? On 8base, I mean.
I mean, it just shows up in the data. Right?
Oh, I see.
So if
Okay.
I look here and I look in the data, all the leads that we created are all here now.
Oh, nice. Cool.
And we have this editing capability in here where, you can add them in. We also have, you can import a CSV of data if you want. Although now that I've seen some of the cool stuff that Postman can do,
Mhm.
maybe I'll just be doing that from now on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, I think we went through quite a bit. Like, I feel like it's pretty interesting how we can use Postman to like populate data into this. I mean, it's a great tool, I think, for viewing the data, sending the data, testing the data,
Yeah,
and
for sure.
more and more of that kind of way. So, but I think with once the data's in there, it seems like you can do a lot with 8base by creating all of your custom like front ends and things like that, which is pretty
Yeah. I mean, I've Postman has been around for a while.
cool.
And it's something that I've always in my brain been like, you should be using this. I don't understand
Mhm,
why you're not using this.
mhm,
But even from here, you can see, right? Like
mhm,
from a database, you can use it to populate the databases. You can use it for testing purposes.
mhm,
And there's a whole bunch of like sharing capability too, right? Like you can
mhm.
create a workspace that you can share with your team, and then your team can manage everything there and test everything there. And
Cool. Yeah, for sure. Definitely. I would love to see our GraphQL feature evolve a little bit more to create like with our HTTP requests, you can do a lot of like workflow control. Like you can chain requests. Let me send you this blog. I don't know if you want to pull it up real quick.
sure.
It's a blog actually I wrote a while back about just like workflows. So let me show it to you. I know we have 15 minutes left. Just a sec. Uh, um, yeah, so let me just show you this one blog. Okay, cool. So I'll post it in our chat. Um, So if you pull this blog up just with Postman about like the kind of workflows you can create. So yeah, so if you scroll down, like with HTTP requests here, you're seeing like you can chain requests, you can have variables feed into multiple other requests.
Mm,
Which kind of like if you're using environment variables, like if you send one data to another API, that API can do something else.
right.
The second workflow where you can send APIs asynchronously. So here I show you can send like multiple APIs within one single request. Um, and then the third one is that you can use the collection runner. So for those of you who are Postman users, collection runner lets you send like like multiple APIs, like a certain amount of time, but you can loop over requests. So especially this, we do all of this, of course, with our HTTP requests. But with GraphQL, I mean, I know that the use cases are a little bit different, but I'm curious about, seeing workflows evolve in that way.
Could
Because
this not work from a like
I think
number one and number three? I think looks like there's some pretty specific stuff there, but this
Yeah,
looks
so
like it's
looping over
descriptive, right?
requests, I think like with the collection runner, I don't think we have the capability to send GraphQL requests using
Mm-hmm.
collection runners yet. But I do believe that you can send some asynchronous requests. So I think you can send like HTTP requests within a GraphQL request and stuff like that. But that's something that's worth me testing out and
Well,
exploring.
I
So
mean, in essence, GraphQL still uses HTTP, right?
yeah,
It just it has its own kind of structure compared to REST. So it looks
yeah,
like your number one here
yeah,
seems fairly specific to how REST
yeah.
works, and number three also.
But number two, I think I write something about there's this function called pm.send request.
Yeah.
And I talk about that. And in that, you can see that you're sending another API within an API. So,
Mm-hmm.
so
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
that allows you to do a little bit more dynamic workflow sort of stuff. So yeah, I mean, it's interesting. There's a lot for me to explore, especially when it comes to working with Postman and GraphQL. But I actually really like that 8bases GraphQL API. Lets you see like the changes you make pretty dynamically. So I'm
Mm-hmm.
gonna play around with it a little bit more after our stream. So I think I learned more from you as well in the stream as well about how to work with some of your APIs as well. So, but yeah, that's pretty much it. I think we have like about 10 minutes left. This was a lot of fun, Ray. I don't know if you how you felt, but I thought this
Yeah,
was
no,
really,
definitely. And I'm super excited about
yeah,
some of that Postman stuff,
for sure.
especially
Yeah.
the randoms. The randoms, that's so cool.
Yeah.
It's such a smart thing from a data perspective to be able to have the
Hmm.
ability to do that.
Hmm. Yeah, for
I'll
sure.
have to talk with engineering and see how well we can if we can start integrating Postman a little bit tighter with our GraphQL side.
Definitely, yeah. I just wanted to share a couple of things, at least to our audience, and I think we've got today was a really great stream. I think a lot of great conversation from a lot of people. I just wanted to just share a couple of more interesting things that we have going on the Postman side. So, if you like this session, we're actually doing a Postman intergalactic session. So, if you're not aware of intergalactic, we do these like series of educational trainings every month. And next month in August, we're doing one all about testing and developing GraphQL APIs. So if you like the stream and want to learn a little bit more about GraphQL and how to work with it in Postman, we'll also talk about how to develop GraphQL schemas with Postman. So that could be something interesting. So be sure to take a look at that. I'll just post that in the chat, and feel free to register if you're interested. And it's a free training, so you'll get to learn a little bit more about GraphQL as well. So, and we have a recording and everything available there too. Postman just acquired a company called Akita. So this is really exciting, and I'm really excited about what's going to happen because it's all about API observability. So we're going to incorporate API observability into our product as well. So I'm curious about all the things that we're going to have going on after this acquisition. So this is a really great thing that recently happened. So feel free to read this blog just to learn a little bit more. I wanted to share just some GraphQL docs on the Postman end. We have like GraphQL overviews, and within our labs team, we have like basically how you can get started with working with GraphQL and Postman. It was interesting because when I talked to you initially, Ray, you had used GraphQL in Postman, but you were using it like the old way. But since we've enhanced our capabilities, it's we have a completely new user interface for that. So I hope some of you guys found that kind of cool, just the new way of working with GraphQL in Postman. So you can always read a little bit more about how to work with that interface here and get started. And we have a lot of interesting things. And I think this stream really kind of showed off GraphQL really well. So I'm really happy about that. And then, yeah, I just want to show like our upcoming live stream that's happening next Thursday. So this is all about the student ambassador program. So my colleague Ian is going to talk about working with the Azure student ambassadors, just to talk a little bit about the world of tech and tech careers. So be sure to tune into that one as well. Ian's a great host, and I'm really curious about what the ambassador program looks like. And then finally, if you guys are avid Postman users and you have any questions, we have our Postman community that I wanted to share with you all. So feel free to add any questions you have as you get started working with Postman. A lot of your questions, a lot of resources are here. And you'll be able to learn a little bit more. So those are, I guess, like the few things I wanted to share. Did you want to talk about anything? Any shout outs you wanted to give, Ray, on your end?
I muted. That's
Yeah.
my fault. All right. Yeah, sure. So from an 8-base perspective, 8base.com is our home base. At the same time, we have our documentation. That's at docs.8base.com. Our community is at community.8base.com. And then, finally me. So I'm our advocate, and I'm the one that, we're trying to help 8base as much as possible.
Yeah.
I'm on Twitter, I'm on Mastodon, all over the place, really.
How's the Mastodon world these days?
I wish I was better into it. I
Yeah.
know my buddy Simon, who's also a developer advocate, and he works at a company called Begin. He's heavily into Mastodon. And
Mm.
it's really the way that, it seems the community is going.
Yeah.
I have an account and I have the notifications enabled, but
Right.
that's the extent of where I'm at with that Mastodon at the moment.
Right. Yeah, because now there's, I guess, threads and there's a lot going on.
You
So
know, I held off of Threads for a little
yeah.
bit, and then I was
Mhm.
like, you know what? Everyone's on Threads, and I like joined Threads, and then the next day, like I saw a title of an article that was like, check out all the information that Threads is collecting on you, and I was like, oh,
Yeah.
I could
Feels
have
like a
waited a
lot.
day.
Yeah. Yeah. I hear you. I hear you. It feels like a lot going on to find you, but I'm still on Twitter. So, you can always reach out to me on Twitter. And I mean, Ray, you're on Twitter as well. So
Yeah,
I don't
yeah,
know.
exactly.
But yeah, this was a lot of fun. This was so great. I feel like I learned so much. Our users are like, 8base is a cool tool, sir. So kudos. So lots of great stuff from today. So this was a lot of fun. Thanks so much for joining me today, Ray. I think we kind of went through a lot. So
Yeah.
this was a great stream. And yeah, I want to thank everyone for tuning in and being a part of today's stream, asking all the amazing questions, and being part of our community. So we really appreciate it. So with that, I think it's time to bid goodbye to everyone. So
Well,
all right,
thanks for having me.
of course. All right, have a good one, Ray. We'll catch you on the internet
See
or
ya.
in person at a conference.
Yeah, for
So
sure.
yes, sounds good. All right, bye bye, guys.
Bye,
Bye.
everybody.